Good evening. Good evening? No, it's good afternoon. I just wanted to keep you guys on your toes. Okay, real quick, we're gonna do a audio video test. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, looks like my words are in sync with my video, so that's a win. I don't know if I'll ever get over the scar. Yeah, so how are y'all doing? My Tuesday is going well, other than I'm at the bottom of the barrel in terms of my caffeine supply. I woke up, realized I had no coffee. I did have a protein shake that had some caffeine in it. And now I'm drinking, this is a cup of, what is it? A cup of instant decaf, like crystal instant coffee in hot water. It's as bad as it sounds. But I'm scraping the bottom of my barrel to try to find a way to get caffeine into my bloodstream. I would normally just run and get coffee, but my oldest is homesick today, so it's just me and him, and my wife's got the car, so we're kind of locked in here. But yeah, I'm gonna do my best here. So what are we doing today? One thing I wanted to tell you about is I stayed up. Oh, this is the other reason why I need caffeine and why today was a bad day to have very little caffeine in my house. I stayed up till like 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. working on yeah. I posted this, let's see, I posted this at 2:16 a.m. last night. So one of the things that I do as part of my work is I maintain an automation suite of automated tests using Playwright. And so hold on, before I do this, let me go, no, actually I can do it from in here. Edit, no, actually I can't. Go to Neovim config, and I want to pull my latest changes. And then I want to go back to, okay. So one of the things that I do as part of my day-to-day work is I maintain this suite of automated tests, and I add to it over time. And so when I made the switch, or have been attempting to make the switch from VS Code to Neovim, I wanted to make sure that I had some way to run Playwright tests, because that's what I use for this automation library is Playwright. Well, there is a library, a plugin, Neovim. I guess first I should probably tell you there's a plugin called Neotest, which sort of serves as this framework for supporting running tests in Neovim. It provides kind of that test explorer functionality like what you would see in VS Code, and then it has a bunch of supported runners. This is what we used for the .NET testing too. If you watch those videos or were here when we did that on stream. But they also have one for Playwright, which was great. I installed this and didn't really think about it until the first time I needed to do some work on this project. And I ran into all sorts of issues, right? So one issue was when I opened the summary pane like I have now, this wasn't actually displaying any tests. So I couldn't even run tests. Then I got to a point where I could display tests. but I couldn't run the test for some reason. So I basically had to start going down the rabbit hole of picking apart this plugin, and this all started like a week and a half ago, and I just came back to kind of deep dive into it yesterday. And so I kind of was like, I was kind of fixated, like, I'm not going to bed until I get this squared away. And I was able to kind of narrow down the issues I was having and why it was, what the problem was, and actually I think I've logged a total of, I've logged 2 issues on this repo, one of which, one of the issues actually has 3 different separate issues in it. And then I opened up PRs to address them. And I also forked this. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I want to use Neotest Playwright too, but I'm having trouble, it's likely you're on a Windows machine, because it seems like there's not a huge user base of Neovim on Windows machines. And so a lot of the plugins and configurations and stuff sort of assume you're either on a Linux or more than likely you're on a Mac, which seems to be more of the case. So I actually forked this. So if you go to my GitHub, there's a fork of this that's out there that you should check out if you're a Windows user. It's just obviously it's under my name, but it has the same repo name. But the branch you want is called, let's see, the branch you want is called fork. This is the branch that has all the changes in it. And yeah, so now you can see if I open my Neovim tests. Oh, actually, I probably need to sync my. Let's see. Let's sync. Watch, I'll have done all this work and wanted to show you guys, and then I'll get it shown to you and it won't work still. But I promise, I had this working last night on my own computer, on my other computer, and so I wanted to share the journey a little bit because I think it's interesting. I think these are interesting stories because they're a great way to measure your ability as a developer, your ability as a programmer to grow over time, right? To be able to like really have no idea how something works, but have that willingness to dig into it and pick it apart and do that debugging and that troubleshooting to get down to the nitty-gritty of what exactly is the problem, find a solution, and then not only have that solution for yourself, but be able to offer that solution for other people, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's quit out of this. Edit Neovim config. Just want to make sure this configuration is correct. Yeah, so there's my forked version of the plugin. Yeah, that all looks right. Whoops. Neovim. I'm gonna be super bummed if my changes don't work on this machine. But what should happen here, yeah, there we go. So see how it discovered a bunch of tests over here? So this wasn't happening before. Then I got it to a point where it was discovering some tests, but it wasn't taking into account all the different projects that I have in this repo. That's the way Playwright works. You can set up different projects. Typically your projects are like, I'm going to run my tests in this browser. I'm going to run my tests in this browser. I'm going to run my tests in this browser with this particular set of configuration. That tends to be how your projects are kind of set up. Like for example, if I go into my Playwright config, you can see I have a set of projects here for Chrome, Edge. I have an API project to test our public API and a cleanup. So basically the way Neotest Playwright plugin was supposed to work is it was supposed to take that all into account. So if I look at if I go to one of my specs, you can see it discovers the fact that I have, these tests, but then I also have a version that I can run on a my Chrome project. Oops, a Chrome project, but then I can also run one in Edge too. So that all was kind of broken and not working. And I got it working. So let's see if I go ahead and let's go ahead and just run one of these. Space PR. So this is going to run it in both because I haven't picked one project or the other, so it's going to run both of my tests, and it's actually opening on my other screen. But you can see here's the browser running. That was the setup, and now it'll go ahead and do the actual test. So this is the actual test in I think this is in Chrome, and then there'll be a test that also is in Edge. They look relatively the same because obviously Edge is based on Chromium, but Playwright does offer like vendor specific channels that you can run your tests against, which is nice. Oh, here's the other one. There you go. So I couldn't at one point yesterday, I couldn't even get this to work, to actually launch and run tests. Then I got that to work. And then I ran into another issue, which is I couldn't get the statuses to report correctly. So my test would pass, but it would show red X's here, right? And so here's the wonderful thing about developing your skills with code is like, in a lot of cases, you would get to a place where something wasn't working for you and there's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck. It is what it is, right? You just have to live with it, right? You can't call up the person that makes your car and tinker with it or ask them to help you debug or troubleshoot, nor do you probably have the skill set to like tear it apart. Or is that really realistic? Because it probably requires, equipment and facilities that one individual can't probably afford. The nice thing about code, though, is none of that is a factor, right? So as long as you have, a brain in your head, and shoes on your feet, you don't even have to have shoes on. You can dive into something and figure it out, which is what I ended up doing yesterday. And that's why I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning, was because I was basically like, okay, I can figure this out. I can look at the Neotest Playwright source code, because it's, luckily for me, it's actually written. I mean, even if it wasn't, if it was written in Lua, I could look at the source code and reason about it and figure this out. But luckily for me, both Playwright, the Neotest Playwright plugin, is actually written in TypeScript and compiled to Lua, so it's even a little bit more friendly to work through. So it really came down to, I guess, 3 fixes. So I'll just show you the fixes. So the first fix has to do with, so the way Neotest works is Neotest basically defines this interface that these runner plugins can program against, right? Like any good extendable plugin system. And so one of the things Neotest expects is it expects the plugins to provide a spec. And forgive me if I'm not describing this all accurately. This is just purely my understanding that I've gathered through going into the rabbit hole here to figure out this problem for myself. And so it basically expects you to build what they call a spec. And so part of what Neotest Playwright does to build that spec is it builds this test filter. And this test filter is basically essentially the thing that you want Playwright to run, right? That's essentially what it comes down to. It's basically a filter that says, we're only going to run the tests that fall in this file. And so that's what this piece of code in Neotest Playwright is doing. The problem is that for whatever reason, and I honestly don't know, I put this in the issue that I logged on Neotest Playwright's GitHub, because I was honest, like, I don't know whose problem this is, but this seems to be a way to fix it, right? But basically there's this problem with with the path separators, and really all the issues come down to path separators. So whoever was on the Windows team and decided to use backward slashes instead of forward slashes, I'd like to meet that guy, and I would like to just have a conversation. I'm not going to do anything to him. But that's basically what this came down to, where the files were all being passed like this. This was basically the spec command that, or this is the spec command that's being generated by Neotest Playwright, but this test filter that's being passed to this very last argument in this command has all these backslashes in it. And for whatever, because it's a Windows machine, that's why it's there. But for whatever reason, the Playwright CLI did not like this. And so if I change these backward slashes to forward slashes as the path separator, everything worked hunky-dory. So what I did was I just added a check that basically says, hey, if we're currently running on a Windows machine, just replace all the separators here in the test filter. That way, every time the test filter is passed to the Playwright CLI, it's always using forward slashes as the path separator, and we'll just remove that issue. So that was the original issue. That's where this all started. That was the thing that was preventing me from being able to actually see my tests in this tree structure, because what Neotest Playwright does is it runs the Playwright CLI using a particular reporter, and then it parses the output of that reporter to display what you're seeing here in the terminal. And so because it couldn't run the command to get the JSON out, the report comes out in a JSON file, it couldn't get this information to display here. So that was the first fix. That I had kind of stumbled on like a week ago or so. The fun part, though, of solving problems is usually solving one problem begets, yes, solving more problems. And so once I had that done, once I had that fix in place, then it came to where I wanted to actually come into a test file and I wanted to run it. And every time I tried to run this test file, it wasn't working. It was basically saying, hey, we can't find any tests. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's great. I'm confused. I'm actually confusing the issues. So this issue, the issue of not being able to run a test file was fixed by this solution, right? Because the test filter was being passed. Whenever I would hit leader TR, this test filter would be passed to the Playwright CLI, and the Playwright CLI would be like, I don't know, there's no test there. So what do you want me to do? So when I implemented this fix, then I was able to come into one of my spec files and do the run nearest test command basically, and then it started working. The problem of the Explorer, the very first problem of the Explorer, that was very similar, but it was a little different. So remember I said the way Neotest Playwright builds this tree structure is with a reporter. Well, what was happening was I had a package in my project here that whenever you would run the Playwright command, there would be this extra output that would be generated. So let me go to the GitHub issue, because this makes it a little clearer. So this was the original issue I filed. Basically, this is the command that gets run by our plugin to generate the output that it needs to display all of the test information. And so what was happening was I had a couple packages in my project that were displaying these warnings. And what Neotest Playwright was doing was it was assuming that the output of this command was always just going to be JSON. So it was just parsing the complete output every time without concern for any extraneous output either above the JSON or after the JSON. And the very simple solution was just to add some checks, right, to say, okay, what we need to do first is we need to actually check for a JSON object, get that JSON object as a string, and then only try to decode or parse that. And so with this set of checks and this little try catch loop in here, that fixed that problem. Now, granted, the problem also was fixed by just getting rid of that extraneous output that was generated as part of the command. And I said that in here, that's one solution, obviously. But I thought, this thing should be more robust than that, right? We shouldn't just assume that there's only going to be JSON, at least in my opinion. So I submitted this fix for that. So that's 2 of the 4 issues. The next 2 issues are back on that same path separator problem. So the path separator problem, the first issue obviously was the test filter. So it would basically pass this test filter that had these different path separator, and for whatever reason the Playwright CLI was like, I don't know, there's no test there, I can't find any tests. So that fixed that. However, once I got the tests to a point where I could actually run them, then I had this issue where the test would pass, but the indicator would say it failed. So that was weird. And that was, again, caused by this path separator issue. Again, if you know the guy who decided to use backslashes instead of forward slashes, I would love to meet that individual, because he robbed me of an evening of sleep. So basically what was happening in this case was Neotest Playwright builds this results object and hands this to Neotest. And this results object has keys that are essentially the location of the test. Essentially, let's just boil it down to that. And by the key, Neotest can get the results it can display, including errors, and in this case, Neotest Playwright provides a way to view attachments that are generated as part of your test. But basically, the gist is Neotest uses this particular key to grab this status and then display it. The other thing that the Neotest Playwright plugin does is it provides a way to identify the positions of your tests. And again, those positions have IDs that look, again, very much like the keys in the result object. However, these, in the case of Neotest Playwright, these IDs, these position IDs, actually come from another plugin called Tree Sitter. So what was happening was Neotest or Tree Sitter was passing back a path or a position with backward slashes, and Neotest Playwright was generating results objects that had forward slashes. And so when Neotest took this position and went to go find the corresponding result for that position so it could display the right status, it couldn't find one because of the mismatching path separators, and so it would just say failed. That's kind of like the default in Neotest in their source code. If you go look at it, there's just this default case where if it can't find it in the results, it just says, oh, it failed. So the solution there was relatively straightforward. There's a piece of code where these position IDs get built in Neotest Playwright. And so we just, again, add a very specific Windows compatibility check where we say, hey, if we're on Windows, we need to make sure these position IDs use forward slashes and not backward slashes. And we just replace them all. And then the third issue is very much on the same, in the same vein. There's a feature in Neotest Playwright, which is what allows you to have this dynamic discovery with multiple projects. And so you have to enable a Boolean flag to make this work. And when it's enabled, there's a different piece of code that handles generating these position IDs. So it's basically a different branch of code that generates position IDs, but the root of the problem is the same, is that the position IDs that get generated when that dynamic discovery is enabled don't line up with the keys that are in the result object. And so the solution again here was rather straightforward. We go to the place in the code where that logic is being done to build these position IDs, and we just need to make sure that the paths that we're using as part of that code have those path separators replaced again. In this case, we have to replace them before we do a specific check. And this is not going to mean anything to you, but basically there's a specific check that Neotest Playwright is doing to figure out if it should further build out the position ID or if it can locate a very specific value for the position ID. And so we just have to replace these paths so this check will properly return true and properly return false properly. So those were the fixes. I went ahead and, like I said, I created a fork for it and then opened some PRs. I don't know if they'll ever get merged, but if you yourself are using Neovim and you want to also have the ability to debug and run your tests and see your tests in Neovim, then Neotest Playwright is going to be the right plugin. But if you're on Windows, you might run into similar issues that I ran into. So you might be interested in checking out that forked version of the plugin and putting it to use. Okay, so that's topic number 1 for the day. Which has taken up half our time already. Topic number 2 is we're going to organize our alt text project a little bit. So let's go ahead and quit out all this. And let's go to, also if you're familiar with automated end-to-end tests and you've used something like Selenium or Cypress, those are great tools. But if you haven't checked out Playwright, you really, really should go check it out. Their docs are fantastic. I think you'll really, really like it. It'll probably change the opinion you have about writing end-to-end tests. It makes life so much easier. You should definitely go check that out. That's my blurb. That's my sales pitch for Playwright. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into AltGen. And we worked on this yesterday. And what did we accomplish? What we accomplished yesterday was we basically wrote some evals, really simplistic evals. But they give us what we're looking for, which is just basically given a particular image, we want to make sure our prompt elicits that the prompt that we give the LLM elicits alt text that contains particular keywords. I think I'm probably going to end up refactoring that at some point to do like an LLM assisted eval, but for now we have it, so I can go ahead and show you. So we just have some additional end-to-end tests that are parameterized, and all it does is it gets a particular test image, and then we've just defined some keywords that we hope are always a part of the alt text that's generated. What I want to do today is actually let's look at my to-dos, because I know I put a few different to-dos in here. So we have to do for add test coverage. We're going to do that today. Use LLM assisted. That's the lazy T. We need to do validation against different files. Needs to be specific to different LLMs. Yeah. So this is all stuff we probably need to tackle when we start thinking about adding additional providers. We definitely need to add test coverage. We'll do that separately. But today, what I wanted to do today with the time I have is I just wanted to organize this project a little bit, because everything essentially lives in program.cs at the moment. And so I just want to extract some of this stuff out. So let's create a new folder, and let's call it generate Is that a good name? I don't know. I'm thinking of how to do it kind of like that, you know, kind of that screaming architecture pattern where we kind of group things by feature, not necessarily by like type or concern. So if we call this generate, oh, I need to remove this, delete this, and add generate. And we'll just start putting things there, and then we can organize them as we see fit. So let's move this to its own file. Let's move this to its own file. These are our provide. Hold on. Why does that say? Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay, so these are our factories. So let's go ahead and namespace these. This is going to be alt.gen.api.generate. Yeah, it doesn't match now, but it will. And then let's go ahead and move this. So mv or m is move, and then you can move it to the directory by saying go up one, and then we're gonna put it in. Oh, actually, we don't have to go up one. We just need to say generate, and then that should move it to this folder up here. So move, same thing here. We'll move this into the generate folder. And we don't have a namespace here yet. It's going to be alt.gen.api.generate program. Okay, let's pull this out. Let's pull this out. Our Gemini service. Pull this out. We'll pull all these out too. So I think what I want to do is I want to move alt text provider. I want to move this to I want to move this to the generate folder. If this kind of stuff you might not find interesting, but I kind of like going through the exercise of organizing things because it kind of helps you think about the problem and the way you're solving it a little bit. Kind of forces you to rethink it, in my opinion, or think through it again, maybe more clearly. So I think then under the generator, we're going to have a providers namespace. Whoops. So this will be providers. And then in here, we'll move our specific provider stuff. So we'll have Gemini, which I don't know. Should I use Gemini? Should I use the model name? I'm going to use the model name. That may be a bad decision because I could use like Google or Chat GPT, or no, I could use Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic, which probably is the right way to do it. But I've already started naming things Gemini, and I don't want to refactor it. So I'm just gonna leave it. It's my project, damn it. I'll do things the way I want to. Let's see. Gemini. And now what we'll do is we'll move these guys into, this will be generate providers / Gemini. And if we did everything right, it should be there. Yep, okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. Yeah, MV, oh, just M. Generate providers. And I'll have to fix all my usings, obviously, because I'm creating all these namespaces. Generate providers / Gemini. So I need to go in here. I need to open these guys up and say namespace is going to be altgen.api.generate.providers.gemini. We'll go ahead and copy that. And we'll put that over here. Did you say something, buddy? Cal? Did you say something? What did you say? Oh. Put this here. Okay. So now we have those namespace. Let's go back to our program. We'll pull some more stuff out of here. So these are all like specific like Gemini related. Let's see, move type to Gemini response. Move type to candidate. Gemini request. And I actually think I'm going to put all these in the same. Whoop. I'm going to put all these in that request. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. These are going to be in separate files. The parts can probably be in their same. So I'm going to do. Delete that, and then I'm going to go to part.cs and I'm going to dump those here. And I'm breaking the sacred C# law of one file for one class. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that rule exists. That's a good rule for certain reasons, but I break it every so often when it feels okay to do that. Okay, program CS, alt text response. These are specific to our API, not to a provider. This needs to go under that namespace. This is an extension we can put in a separate. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to I mean, obviously you have to have a common place to put stuff, like for alt-gen exception, right? That's kind of a, that's like an app level construct in this use case. So this probably needs to go in some sort of like common folder or something like that. Yeah, so let's organize these a little bit. So candidate's going to be namespaced under Gemini. Namespace. providers dot Gemini, like that. And then we're gonna move the file there. So MV. So this is one thing maybe that I'm not doing the right way, the Neovim way, because it does feel slower than doing this in VS Code. This refactoring, which is the first time I've actually really done some meaningful amount of refactoring. Generate providers, Gemini. The don't want to copy, I want to move it. Generate providers / Gemini. Oh. Need to move this one. I keep doing that. Generate providers / Gemini. You know, one of the things streaming this though has really helped me get a little bit more comfortable. Actually, it kind of goes back to like streaming the Advent of Code stuff. This year for Advent of Code in 2024, I streamed every solution basically I worked on. I only did day 16, but it's definitely helped me get better at being able to talk while I program, which I think is actually kind of an underrated skill. And it probably is a helpful skill whenever you start having to do interviews with people or work with other people. So, generate writers, Gemini. If I do that one more time, I'm gonna scream. I keep hitting escape. Generate providers, Gemini. Okay, then we just need to make sure these are all namespaced properly. Providers.Gemini. I hit caps lock, and that is something you do not want to do in Neovim. Hitting caps lock in Neovim is like going to the nether in Minecraft. It's just a bad experience. Okay, that's namespace properly. Isn't there like a preview functionality to... I thought there was a preview. No, that's not that. Shift P? There we go. So this one's namespace, that one's namespace, that one's namespace. This guy is not namespaced. Altgen.api.generate.providers.Gemini. Now GitHub's getting with the program. There we go. Come on, Copilot. Look at you go there. This kind of work is where when Copilot's firing on all cylinders, you're like, thank you, Copilot. You can tab your way to glory. There's a guy I follow online. His name's Scott Hanselman. I always refer to him as like the nicest guy in tech. Just super. Seems like I've never met him in person, but from everything I've seen of him online and being just like an observer of his interactions and the content he posts, just seems like a super nice guy. But one of the things he said in a podcast, I think, or a talk or something I watched him in, was you're going to Control Z your way to glory. You know, when you've really screwed something up really bad, you just Control Z. Or if you're in Neovim, it's you. Normal mode, you. Okay. So now we have the Gemini namespace pretty well organized, and now we just need to go to our usings, and we need to clean this up. Global using, and then let's go to our program. Our program CS also has a bunch of usings in it. Oh, I guess not. There's just one that we could clean up. Usings. There we go. And then this one's going to be global using, providers. Oh no, generate, not providers. Okay, so we should have, now we have our Gemini stuff pretty well organized. Now let's organize some of this REST stuff, like the requests. We have our requests. Yeah, we have this guy, which is our exceptions. Let's just add a namespace for that, and let's do the very sophisticated common, also known as shared, also known as throw everything in here that you don't know where to put it. And let's extract this to a separate class. And those two need to go somewhere that's specific to the generate. So, oh, and the provider, LM provider needs to go in the provider namespace, I think. So let's move that there. See, I knew there was a reason why I had the provider namespace. So we're gonna move this to, which I realize you guys can't see some of my tree, which I apologize. I'm kind of low on my remembering where my head is at. Let's see, so this needs to go to generate providers namespace. This needs to go to the common space. Not common. Sorry, Copilot, you're not. Oh shoot, I hit the caps lock again. This is going to be dot providers. Oh, nope, not that. Generate dot providers. Which means we need to go to our usings. We need to add a global using. Then we need to add a global using common. I definitely am getting a little bit more fluid with the then motions. Feels a little bit better. Yeah. And then the final thing we need to do is we need to organize. So I'm going to put these. Okay, so these actually are going to go under... Can I bulk move these? Yes, I can. These actually are going to go under the provider namespace. Provider. Yeah, providers. This. Providers, like that. And then, so that's Gemini, that's providers. And then at the top level of that generate namespace, we're going to have our, we're going to have alt text response, and then we're going to have our requests. This is going to go into an extensions file. And we could have a handler here. We could come up with like a static class that has a handler on it. Yeah, do I want to do that? I don't know. Is that overkill? I don't know. So we're going to move this to the generate namespace. And this is going to be generate. Which I don't know if you guys have actually seen. There's a pattern that's kind of running around in the minimal API world called Reaper. Reaper pattern stands for, I think it stands for a request, an endpoint, and a response, which I really like. Right, so it's almost like the Reaper pattern almost to me is like taking this idea of like a pure function, right, and mapping it to this Reaper pattern, where, or I guess mapping it to like a REST API use case where you have some input, right? You have some input, then you have a function, and then that function is obviously going to give you some output. Whoops, output. And so in the Reaper pattern, I guess in my mind, whoops, nope, wrong direction. I kind of look at it like this, where this is your request. Let's just do rec. This is your endpoint, and then this is your this would be your response, which I think is kind of like conceptually is a really clean way of thinking about how you're building API endpoints. You're like, hey, someone's gonna give me some data. I'm going to do some processing with it. It's going to come into my endpoint. My endpoint's like this gigantic function that has a bunch of other functions in it. And then I'm going to return a response back to you. And to me, that just kind of simplifies the whole concept and idea of developing an endpoint. And that's kind of, I bring that up to say that kind of is where I naturally seem to always end up when I in building an API, especially with .NET and these minimal APIs, is I kind of always end up with that Reaper pattern where I have a request that represents what I'm going to get in, I have a response, which is what I'm going to hand back, and then I have this handler lambda or delegate that is essentially my endpoint, right? Is that function. Is it always pure? No, not in the sense that you would think of pure functions as being, but it maybe pure function's a bad, maybe just function, right? You're thinking of it in terms, you're thinking of your endpoint in this classical sense of a function that has some inputs, does some work, and gives back an output. That was my quick explanation the Reaper pattern, which is probably not as good as Nick Chappus or who's another guy that talks about the Reaper pattern quite a bit. Ardalis, Steve Ardalis, he talks about that quite a bit. But sticking with that, let's go ahead. Why don't we just do that? Why don't we make a generate endpoint? And there's several libraries that whoops, I shouldn't have made that there. There's several libraries in the .NET ecosystem that have sort of tried to codify that Reaper pattern. What is see, Reaper pattern .NET NuGet package. There's several out there. Yeah, fast endpoints I think is the one I'm thinking of. That has basically tried to kind of just again put like a whole library around this idea of you know, I have an endpoint that takes a request, it takes a response, it does something, right? In this case, handle async. It implements a handle async method that expects to do some work with the input and give back a response, which I think is kind of cool. Oh, that's kind of interesting. VFriends is one of their sponsors. If you guys don't know who what VFriends is, that's it's like a cartoon project that was created by a guy named Gary V, which I know Gary V is not everyone's cup of tea, but he is mine, and so that's pretty cool to see. I wonder why VFriends is using. I had to go check that out. Why does VFriends use VFriends fast endpoints? Yeah, no. I've never actually used fast endpoints. I've just heard of it. So that that would definitely be a fun stream to do, is maybe go through the tutorials together and just build something with it, build a small little API with it. Anywho, back to what we're doing. Let's add a generate endpoint class here. So we'll say generate endpoint.cs, and this is just going to be a static, it's just a static class. Namespace is going to be altgen.api.generate. It's going to be a static class, generate endpoint. Excuse me. And then it just needs to have a signature that matches what's already there in the program CS. Take that, go to our endpoint. So this, we can, it's not gonna like any of that, is it? Let's see. So this is async, and this needs a name, and it needs a return type, which I think is action. Is it action result or action? Oh, maybe it's just result. Yeah, it's a task of result. I can never remember. And then let's just piggyback back off of fast endpoints and say handle async, like that. We don't need this. I don't think I'm returning the right. Cannot convert from iResult to HT. Oh, okay. So I need iResult here. iResult. There we go. And then we got to get rid of this extra guy here. Oh, and this needs to be public. And then we can go back to our program. Now what we can do is we can delete this. And we can say map post. We can say generate endpoint dot handle async. Put this up here like that. Yeah, and we really cleaned up that file now. And then let's move this validation results to that common namespace. You might say, Steven, why didn't you just do all this organization up front? Now you just wasted time, you know, refactoring all this and just basically moving files around. It's a very valid point, but I feel like when you're just beginning a small project like this, you can kind of take advantage of that single file construct to just kind of like, you know, first draft, explore the problem, go through all of the issues, kind of plan out and lay out what you think this might look like. And it's okay to have, you can sort of feel like safe knowing, hey, if I false start several times here, I just, you know, control all delete, you know, and start over. Versus once you start organizing things in namespaces and folders and stuff, it can be a little bit more daunting to make big changes. But then once you kind of settle on, okay, yeah, I think this is the right shape, then you can start to put a little bit more structure around that with your namespaces and your folder structures. That's just my own personal preference. Doesn't mean it's the right way. Take that for what it's worth. And obviously we have tests now, so we can run our tests. So let's go to a new window here. Let this load. My time is up, I think. I've been going for about an hour or so. Let us see if we refactored this without breaking anything. Nice. Oh, we broke something. Let's see. Type or namespace I cannot. Oh, okay. So we need to add a using to our tests project. Global using alt gen API dot generate. Yes. Build source. Nice. And let's see, did I get all the namespaces correct here? Yep. 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 Oh, nope, I left a namespace off here. Nope, this should just be generate. And actually, let's change this to just kind of align with our RN. And let's change this to generate response. Oh, and then we need to add our this may not be the right place for this validation logic. Like I've used Fluent Validator before, and that, you implement your own, you implement validators that implement an interface against a particular type. And here I've sort of given the request the responsibility of validating itself. Yeah, I don't know. That feels okay right now. I'm sure someone will tell me it's not okay, but it feels okay. So I'm gonna leave it. And I honestly don't, whoops. I honestly don't know if I need a separate JSON namespace for this, or if this should just live. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it as a separate namespace because it is specific to the Gemini provider, right? I mean, we have the part converter because of Gemini. Yeah, so maybe we do get rid of this. Maybe we move this to, we go up one, and we go to generate providers, Gemini. Because we could always namespace it, you know what I mean? Like you could always namespace the Gemini provider namespace if you wanted to, but in just keeping with the theme of what we're doing here, we can delete this, but that's gonna make one of our usings invalid, I think. Let's try to build. Yeah, the type does not exist. Gemini service. I knew we had a reference to it somewhere. There's probably more unneeded usings here. Oh, yep, and this should go to .providers. I forgot I moved those. And that. Okay, cool. So we're organized now. Look at us. We're out here doing big things. Let's try to build again. Build source. The name assembly does not exist. Cannot be found. Nullability of reference value. Don't match type target. Okay. So what did we do here? Oh, I guess I didn't get that added to my globals. And then there was another error, wasn't there? There was a couple errors. So assembly. And there was like a nullability issue. Oh, no, but this one. So using text. I thought I copied all the usings, but guess I missed some. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Write all out, and for some reason I'm still recording a macro. build the source here. Oh my goodness, it's just one after the other. What? Oh, these are alt text. Oh, my rename didn't rename. Okay, well that stinks. So that's something that's different about. Let's see. Let's do a grep alt text response. Yeah, it didn't rename these. And then I need to add a using for them. No, I have a using altgen API. Oh, I need to rename this too. Okay. I thought I have a using for this. Nope, I don't. I was looking at the wrong file. That's fixed now. This needs to be fixed. And then there was one more, which is my integration test. I promise I'm going to get faster. Generate endpoint test. The type or all. Did I not? How do I fix this? There we go. Gotta remember to write out your changes. Okay. Now let's do a quick smoke test here. Run our end-to-end. And then I think that's going to wrap us up for the afternoon. Ah, this coffee is still as bad as when I started drinking it. Yeah, okay, everything still works. Cool. So now we just have a little bit more organized project. I probably need to, I don't have a Git repo set up for this, do I? Let's get that, let's set one up. Lazy Git. I just want to make sure I don't check in anything I shouldn't. Biggest thing is just no app settings. Font settings is fine. Test files are fine. Usings, yeah. Let's create a Control C. Let's go back to our. So let's create a app settings dot what do we want to call this? App settings dot example dot JSON. Let me take this off screen because I don't want to show you my API key. Okay, so all I wanted to do there was just add an app settings file to my test project, so that people could have an example of what that app settings test.json looks like. And then let's also put a little warning sign here. Warning. Yeah, let's just do something like that. Okay, now let's do lazy get again. Yeah. And there's the app settings.json. Okay, let's commit it all, huh? Git add, git commit m, initial commit. Should have done this. I should have done this at the very beginning of the project, but I don't know. I guess I didn't think of it until just now. This is going to be gh repo create. I'm going to push an existing one. Let's see. This is an LLM powered alt text. Public. Cool. And then let's go and just check it out. So if you guys want to go, if you guys actually want to see the code as we write it, I guess now you can. I should have probably had this up for you the whole time, and I just didn't think about it. We're gonna have more projects in here because we need to add a console app. And I was thinking actually for our web client, we could actually do a Blazor client and just keep everything in the C#.net world. Actually, I was originally thinking we were going to do some sort of like front end framework, but we could, I mean, Blazor you can say is a front end framework too, but that's what I'm thinking we'll do. Okay. That is gonna do it for me, I think. I know we didn't accomplish much functionality wise today. I mean, we talked about my little escapades going down the rabbit hole at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, and then we just kind of organized the project. But we should be able to hit the ground running. There's only a few to-dos that we need to get done. Very quickly, we can just get to a place where we need to create a Docker file for our API, and we can get it deployed out there somewhere. With some proper rate limiting, of course, and then we can start working on that console client that we talked about yesterday. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up my day of streaming. If you're watching this, if you stuck around and hung out and watched, I appreciate it. If not, if you're watching this later on my YouTube channel, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.